Yeah, you know, we call our reading series here at the Killam Library the written word coming to life. And it's true that when you're reading a really good book, a whole world comes to life in your head, but it never ceases to amaze me what kind of spell is woven by somebody reading aloud. And, you know, it's like, I remember when I was a kid and listening to radio dramas, this is dating me, okay? But just, it's like the theater just
Yes.
opens in your head. Just listening to somebody else, and it's a completely different
Yeah.
experience.
Well, it's also interesting to hear somebody else read your work
Yeah.
too, because you know, they'll put their imprint on it, and you know, everybody's voice is different. Everybody has a different poetry to their voice, and sometimes you can listen to your own words and recognize something in it that you haven't heard before, or you're not even aware of. So it's quite wonderful to hear things being read aloud. And you know, because I've spent so many hours in cars going back and forth from Cape Breton to Halifax over the years, I listen to quite a few audiobooks, and that's been a great savior for those, you know, tedious travels. And they're just so wonderful. You stay focused while you're driving, but you're just, the lulling of that voice is so comforting.
Yeah, lulling is a good way to put it. Now, I'm going to take Mary Jane up on her challenge and ask you about your passion for writing.
Yes.
Which, knowing that you write kids' books, you write novels, you write short stories, you've written plays.
Yes.
Obviously, that is one kind of manifestation of this passion. But can you talk a little bit about writing in these very different forms and how that's sort of come about for you?
Well, it started, you know, my first foray into writing would have been playwriting. And from there, I moved into actually writing short stories. And it just so happened that the first book that was published was a children's book. Now I know I've gone from one genre to another, but I felt that as long as I wasn't getting published in the early years, I might as well, you know, try my hand at different forms. And I really liked the short story form. I really liked also the challenges of children's writing. And so for the first few books, I think it was the children's book first, then a novel, children's book, collection of short stories. And that's still continuing, because the next novel that's coming out is for adults, but the book after that is a YA novel. And I find that I don't write simultaneously two titles at once, so there has to be a breath in between. And by changing from the children's writing to the adult writing, it allows for that cleansing, so that I can meet the new work without sort of any residue from the earlier pieces. And I find it actually quite nice just to go back and forth. But I don't think I'd ever be able to manage it, like I say, trying to work a little bit on the adult, a little bit on the child, because it requires different parts of your brain, and your audience is different as well, your readership.
Yeah. What are the challenges of writing for children?
Oh, well, they're smarter than you are. That's the biggest challenge. And children really pick up on insincerity. They pick up when you're patronizing them. They take things quite literally, and they just don't like to be lied to or fooled, or to feel as if they're being led on. So you have to keep all of that in your mind, and always treat the reader as a very intelligent reader, and try always to avoid being pedagogical, because they hate that as well. You know, if it smacks of you're trying to instruct me, they just shy away from that. Whereas with adult writing, your mindset is a little different, because you're not saying to yourself that I'm holding up that you know, with children you're always aware of the readership. I think with the adult work, you're saying to yourself, this is my work, take it or leave it. You know, if it offends you, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. If you feel like I'm lecturing you, well, it wasn't my intention, but you're less concerned about the response.
Which is, of course, a good thing, because if you concern yourself too much with the response, you're not going to be really writing what you
No,
want to
you're just going to be product oriented.
Exactly. Yeah, that's so interesting. What about the short story versus the novel? That must be a totally different experience as a writer. I mean, it's a very different experience to be reading a short story as opposed to a novel.
Yeah, and again, I think certainly short stories again are harder than, for me, they're harder to write than novels because there again are, I don't want to say rules, but there are formats that you do follow with the short story. You have less time or less space in terms of pages to to get across what you want to get across. There has to be an evolution, a change in the character from the beginning of the work to the end of the work. Otherwise, it's just information. Whereas the novel is more free form in that sense. And I think it was quite natural to move from short story into the novel form. I don't have any plans right now to do any short story writing. I'm still writing short stories, but I'm doing that to feed my novel writing, actually.
That's interesting. So when you go back and read, the novels, the short stories, the children's books, do you get a sense of a change in your voice, your writer's voice in these different forms, or are you always recognizably Douglas Arthur Brown?
No, I think that comes with time and skill and experience. I think really I hit my stride with the collection of short stories, and I can see a continuity between that and this book and the book I'm doing now. With the collection of short stories, though, it was interesting because those stories were from a period of 10 years in my life. 5 of them were written on one continent and 5 on another. And that wasn't part of the selling point, but there is a chronology there, and I could see an evolution of the writing from story 1 to story 10 or however many are in the book. But even with the children's writing, I think the things that I like about writing, I think, are evident in that, absolutely. Yeah.